Island. And it's good to see you, Director, albeit virtually. I want to start with some quick points of praise. So I'm not sure if I get time for intro, so I'm going to make this short. DDOT is rightly concentrating its resources in parts of the city that experience the worst traffic violence, especially in wards 5, 7, and 8. As a result, Ward 5, for instance, has seen 20% of prioritized TSI since the program's launch. And Ward 5 is also benefiting from DDOT's focus on high injury network corridors where fatalities and injuries are concentrated. I'm going to just jump right into questions for the sake of time, Director. Uh, Rhode Island Avenue is one of the few Tier 1 high injury network corridors without a dedicated capital project. What steps is DDOT taking to ensure more resources are brought to bear on this dangerous network? And it is worth noting this is now the third year that I'm asking about Rhode Island Avenue.
Sure, and thanks, Councilmember. And I appreciate that you highlighted that we really do focus our priorities on the high injury network. And we are also really focused on high crash intersections. And so I do know that Rhode Island Avenue, we do need a corridor project. While we don't have capital funds available today to do a full corridor study, we are looking at intersections. I don't have a list in front of me of which ones will include Rhode Island Avenue, but I know that is something that we're looking closely at. I know North Capitol and Rhode Island is one on the list, but let me give you an update on other intersections, and that we did, we are asking for a corridor project as well in our budget.
Okay. When you follow up, I would also say if you can reflect or provide an update on whether adjusting the speed limit on Rhode Island is something DDOT is considering. We've seen DDOT adjust the speed limit on other injury network corridors like New York Avenue and Georgia Avenue. And so it'll be helpful to know if that's something that you can also plan for Rhode Island, which I would imagine would not take significant costs. Cars on the MBT. We heard a lot of testimony about this. My office receives many complaints and concerns from neighbors in our Eckington, Edgewood communities that are using the MBT regularly. We have seen an uptick in cars getting onto the MBT. And we just need to address the safety here on the trail. Can you commit to a timeline for ensuring that physical barriers are in place to prevent drivers from entering the MBT?
Yes, and Councilmember, we're equally frustrated by this behavior. And just to be clear, we did add some bollards to try to prevent vehicles from entering at the R Street entrance and the Franklin Street Connector Trail. And we also replaced the M Street bollard, had been damaged. So we just learned that the R Street ones have been removed, so we will be putting those back in. And we're looking at some sort of bollards and planters to help. We're working, there's an adjacent, Fort Myer owns the property adjacently, and we're working with them to get those, which I think will be a better long-term mitigation. The planters can't be removed easily.
And just for clarification, at R Street, it's my understanding there are cones and not bollards. You're planning to implement bollards at R Street?
I think we're looking at even putting planters in, a concrete planter that might be even more difficult to remove.
Something worth focusing also at the end of the trail that my team has reflected on is the spacing. And so a car can go around the bollards that are at the end of the trail. So as you're looking at the implementation, just ensuring that the spacing wouldn't allow someone to go around them, that would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, we're going to take a look at where the bollards are needed, I think how effective they are. We're also working with MPD to help us stop this behavior. And then we do have some signs up, and we're going to try new signs. Again, I'm not sure it's people doing it accidentally, so I don't know if the signs really stop it. But between those who may not realize it's not a road, can help with that subset. And again, yes, we are committed to figuring out ways to try to stop the
Okay.
motorized vehicles.
And is there one quick follow-up here? Is there a timeline for when we should see those adjustments on the trail?
In terms of the planters, I don't have, no, I don't have a timeline, but I'll continue to keep you in the loop.
Okay. I would ask, because this is becoming an increasing threat to safety, that we prioritize that. What we do not want to hear is that a car has mowed down a family, a child on the MBT. And I think that becomes increasingly possible as we're seeing more traffic there. So I appreciate your
I couldn't
partnership.
agree more.
Yes. I want to move to bus shelters. This year, DDOT is slated to update or modify its solicitation to manage DC's bus shelters. Public reporting indicated that DDOT agreed to cap the number of bus shelters at 788, even though there are more than 3,500 bus stops. That agreement has resulted in bus shelters not being built in parts of the city that have greater heat exposure and heat sensitivity, including many parts in Ward 5. Will DDOT commit to eliminating a contractual maximum limit on bus shelters?
Well, the cap that you described was from our legacy contract, so you are correct. We are in the process of doing a new contract, and we will make sure that our bus shelter agreement has a much higher cap. I think it's going to be 1,500 in the new vehicle. That's what we're putting out in the requirements. And we are also taking a deep look at some of the heat concerns. We actually have a study being done on sort of effective ways to provide some cooling elements to the bus shelters, and we'll try to include those in our requirements as well.
And will the outcomes of that study inform the locations of those bus shelters?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Want to transition to sidewalk. We're rapid fire. I love it. I was excited to see the launch of DDOT Sidewalk Gap program last year. However, fewer projects were completed than originally planned. Is that project in full swing, and do you anticipate that it will hit its benchmark in fiscal year 25?
Yes, we were also frustrated with the pace last year, and it really just took a lot longer to get a contract set up. So we were able to make a small, hit a small dent in our 24 plan. Going forward, yes, the contract is now set up. We are going to look to do 8 miles annually. The first batch were ones that we could just do in-house, but with the contracted teams, we'll really get to change the pace.
It's worth noting key gaps slated to be addressed in 2025 include the west side of New York Avenue and Ivy City, the west side of Brentwood Avenue between Union Market and Ivy City, T Street Northeast, the connection to MBT and Eckington, Perry Street between Dwight Mosley and Taft Field. And so, as you can imagine, Ward 5 neighbors are keenly interested in this program, and I'll be tracking it with you. I wanted to move to bus priority. Improving bus reliability in Ward 5 has been a priority of mine. We've been working closely with WMATA, and I've been working closely with your team. I wanted to touch base about 2 projects to ensure they are moving ahead. First, is Florida Avenue Northwest, Northeast still moving forward with a concept of 24/7 bus lanes in both directions?
I believe, yes, that's still in the works.
Okay, are you able to follow up with a definite answer, whether it is, and if not, why? And then if you can also just share a timeline.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll go, I mean, we do have our bus priority projects on our website, but let me go back and confirm. I do want to say that we are committed. We know that bus priorities projects are really critical to the efficiency of our buses. We
Yes.
do want to make sure that we have clean data and that we actually have a threshold for where we build them in terms of frequency of buses, ridership, and are there currently delays? So we will have that lens. We look at all of the things in the queue. So yes, happy to give you more information when we do that deeper look.
And as you look at Florida Avenue, also Rhode Island Avenue, is it still slated for a bus priority project to kick off this fiscal year?
Right. So these are all in the queue. We are doing studies in a number of them just to confirm that it's going to have the intended impacts. So in all cases, if those studies are in the works, I would say when it's done, we'll have more information. But I'll make sure that you're aware of all of those projects.
Awesome. I don't have enough time in this round, but I have more questions. I would just say on Rhode Island, it is a big priority for me. We are counting on DDOT to move forward with that bus priority, as we're also working with the Office of Planning to just reimagine that corridor from about 13th Avenue through of industrial land, which includes large, heavy trucks trafficking in and out of many of our communities. Unfortunately, many of these trucks end up on Ward 5 streets, and there is no meaningful enforcement. Currently, there appear to be only 10 cameras available citywide to police oversized trucks on roughly 580 miles of local streets. Do you believe that DDOT's 10 oversized truck cameras are sufficient to change the behavior of rogue truck operators? And if not, which I anticipate you're going to say, um, what can we anticipate in this upcoming budget process coming from DDOT to address truck enforcement?
So thank you for the question, Councilmember. And our enforcement abilities are limited to camera enforcement. We have about a third of our oversized truck cameras in Ward 5.
And a third being how many?
Well, 3 of the 10.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, and again, we hope that when there's improved compliance that, we can continue to move them around. We do also, actually 4 of the 10, sorry. We also do hope to use signage as a way to also message when when trucks should not be on a given road. But the reality is we need to have roadways that are for freight, and we need to make sure that all roadway users can get to where they need to go. We are a large city. So that's the tool we have. We understand that there have been infractions, and we hope that that's been impacting usage. But again, we are limited in the tools that we have in our toolkit.
And I totally understand the tension that our roadways need to be available to trucks, including in Ward 5. This weekend, I had a leadership meeting with many Ward 5 ANCs and Civic Association leaders. And the one word that characterized our discussion when it came to traffic and safety was enforcement, a lack of enforcement across the board. And that certainly isn't necessarily all on DDOT's shoulders, but at the heart of this question is what we're doing to hold road truck drivers accountable. So I'm going to ask it a different way. Has DDOT analyzed compliance with truck restricted route signage?
That's a good question. I don't know if we have, and it's something I'm going to circle back with the team and get back to you on.
Okay, and I know this may seem like way in the weeds, but again, given the significant share of the industrial land that is located in Ward 5, this continues to be a major issue for us, and so I do appreciate your partnership here. A second question on the AT enforcement is the scope of violations captured. And I know some of my colleagues brought this up earlier. DDOT has taken to installing hawk signals and other flashing beacons that instruct drivers to stop or yield for pedestrians. However, I do not see any cameras deployed to capture violations of these traffic control devices. Could you explain why why you're not using ATE to bolster compliance with these pedestrian safety tools?
So you're correct. We have not used an ATE camera for compliance with hawk signals. We are really prioritizing the intersections that we think are the most problematic and the most dangerous. And so at this stage, speed, stop sign, red lights, there's a high demand for the cameras, and we'll continue to rotate them through where they're needed most. At some point, that could be something we'd look into. We've been talking about experimenting with cameras for other types of violations, but at this point, we don't have a plan. The demand for the hawk signal in terms of vis-a-vis the other possible uses, it hasn't risen to the top of the priority list.
Okay. Anywhere you go around the city, you're likely to see drivers on their phones or engaged in other dangerous behavior. Has DDOT considered deploying ATs to address this, or is that even a capability at this point?
So distracted driving, I agree, is a huge problem. And I mentioned briefly to Councilmember Henderson that we have a pilot we're doing with the Highway Safety Office where there are cameras that are stationed above the vehicles facing down. And we are actually then have a variable message board a few yards ahead that does say, if they see a driver with their phone up, put down your phone, or put on your seatbelt, or slow down. So that is a new type of technology that we've been looking at. It gives immediate feedback, and we're hopeful that that's going to actually have an impact in behavior, and maybe even more impactful than the ticket coming 30 days later.
Yeah, and I would just say I'll name the obvious. Enforcement should not be the responsibility of DDOT alone, and so I do plan to follow up with MPD and other agencies about how they're ramping up enforcement. Because again, as I said, many of our community leaders are growing increasingly frustrated that reckless drivers are able to speed through our communities, kill our neighbors, and sadly our children with no consequence. I do want to commend Councilmember Allen for introducing legislation to move the needle on enforcement, and I was proud to co-introduce that legislation. I'm referencing the STEER Act, but we have to get more serious in this area. I want to pivot and come to congestion pricing. I know that was a hot button topic in years prior. New York City recently rolled out congestion pricing in parts of Manhattan. Early results indicate that transit ridership is up, car and bus commuter times are down, pedestrian traffic is up, and retail traffic is up. What lessons, if any, is DDOT drawing from New York's experience with congestion pricing? And a quick follow-up, I know DDOT conducted a study and we haven't seen the results. If you can provide any update there. So what are you thinking or learning from New York, and what is the status of our own investigation around congestion pricing?
We are observing and like to have other cities in many cases pilot new things and then learn from their experience. And so we're continuing to observe what's happening in New York. I think our concerns with congestion pricing are really based on the fact that we are a little bit of a unique city. We are the nation's capital. We know we have U.S. representatives here who are already looking at home rule and chipping away at things and doing programs that we know are going to be controversial and poke the bear, so to speak. It just doesn't feel like the right timing. And congestion pricing seems like one of those things that will be presumably putting a tax on people who are coming to meet with their representatives. And so I think there is some reason to be circumspect about it at this juncture.
And while I'll certainly concede about the timing of things and wanting to be judicious, I would just note that in that leadership forum I had this weekend, there were a number of A&C commissioners that are normally skeptical of some proposed traffic safety measures that saw net benefit to congestion pricing, namely targeted to out-of-state drivers from Maryland and Virginia. Just going to throw that out there. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up South Dakota. And while I won't get into the particulars, I know your team is working. And again, I want to thank you for being flexible and responsive to our community's needs. If you could give an update on your team's timeline as it stands today, and what Ward 5 neighbors can expect for next steps there.
Sure. And thanks, Councilmember. We, as you know, are in the midst of a study to look at the corridor and other kinds of improvements that could be done, and what the impact of a corridor-wide road diet would be on the surrounding neighborhoods. We should have that study and all the data collected this spring, and then we're planning to share that information with the community late spring, early summer.
Thank you. I'm going to give back 25 seconds, Chairman Allen.